My name is Rachel Hart, and I am 32 years old. If you had asked me just a year ago, I would have told you my marriage was solid. Ordinary, yes, but solid. We'd been together for almost a decade, and while the spark had dimmed, I thought what we had was trust, commitment, foundation. That illusion shattered on a rainy Thursday night. The suitcase sat by the front door like it always did. His sleek black roller bag that had practically become an extra member of our household. He stood there in his pressed navy suit, tie knotted perfectly, hair slicked back in that efficient way that screamed business professional. He looked the part of the man always on the move, closing deals, building the future for us. "I'll be back Sunday night," he said. His voice brisk but distracted as he typed on his phone. I forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Be safe," I murmured, kissing him on the cheek. His cologne was sharp, expensive, familiar, and suddenly nauseating. Because that morning I had found the receipt. It wasn't much at first glance, just a crumpled slip of paper shoved in the pocket of his blazer. A small bistro in a neighboring city, one we'd never visited together. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine. The date matched a weekend he was supposedly in Chicago for meetings. When I asked him casually over breakfast about that trip, he didn't even blink. "All client dinners, nothing special," he said, pouring coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. But something inside me shifted. Something dark and restless stirred in my gut, whispering that the man I thought I knew was hiding something far bigger than a dinner bill. That Thursday night, as he kissed me goodbye and wheeled his suitcase out the door, I stood frozen in the hallway. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the silence he left behind. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't just let him walk away. I grabbed my coat, slipped on my shoes, and followed him. I stayed far enough back that he didn't notice, my heart pounding against my ribs with every step. He drove to the airport just like always. Parked in the usual long-term lot just like always. For a moment, I wondered if I had made a mistake, if maybe I had spun one suspicious receipt into a paranoid fantasy. But then I saw it. He didn't head to the terminal. He didn't roll his bag toward the check-in counters or print a boarding pass. Instead, he cut across the lot, dragging the suitcase behind him until he reached a row of cabs waiting along the curb. My breath caught. I ducked lower in my seat as he loaded the bag into a taxi and climbed inside. The cab pulled away, rain streaking across the windshield, and instinct took over. I started the engine and followed. The city blurred past in flashes of wet pavement and neon lights. Every turn, every stoplight, I stayed behind him, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My mind raced with possibilities. A mistress. A gambling problem. Some shady deal he couldn't tell me about. The cab finally pulled up in front of a quiet neighborhood about 40 minutes away. Not downtown, not near any hotels or business centers. Just rows of tidy houses with trimmed hedges and warm porch lights glowing in the rain. I killed my headlights and watched from half a block back as he climbed out. He paid the driver, retrieved his suitcase, and walked up to a brick house with blue shutters. And then I saw it. The door opening, a woman's silhouette framed in the light. She smiled as if she'd been waiting for him. He leaned in and kissed her. Not a polite peck, not a hello between colleagues. A kiss that was intimate. Familiar. The suitcase rolled across the threshold as she pulled him inside. The door shut, and the house swallowed him whole. I sat there, rain pounding on the roof of my car, staring at the closed door. My chest felt hollow, my hands trembling on the wheel. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. But then, through the fog of shock, I noticed something else. The upstairs window flickered with light. A child's bedroom, toys silhouetted against the blinds. And in that instant, I realized this wasn't just an affair. It was worse. He had a whole other life. And I wasn't part of it. The rain blurred my vision as tears finally broke free. But even through the haze, one thought burned sharp and clear in my mind. I wasn't going to let him keep both worlds. One of them had to end. And I knew exactly which one it would be. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. People often assume betrayal happens overnight. One dramatic reveal, one shocking truth, one instant where everything falls apart. But the truth is, betrayals start small. They start with hairline cracks that no one notices, until one day the whole foundation caves in. Looking back, I should have seen it. When I first met Ethan, he seemed like the kind of man who could walk into any room and own it. We met at a networking event. Me, an assistant just trying to make connections, and him, already the star of his department, shaking hands and making promises he seemed confident he could deliver. He was charming, smooth, and when he looked at me across the room, it was like he actually saw me. Or at least that's what I thought. Our early days were fast and heady. Dinner dates that lasted until midnight, weekends away where we never wanted to leave the hotel room, long talks about building a future together. He told me he wanted a partner, someone who would be with him through the highs and lows, someone he could trust completely. And I wanted to believe I could be that person. The first crack appeared about 2 years into our marriage. Ethan had started climbing the ladder at his company, and the business trips became more frequent. First, I was proud to be the wife of the man who was going places, who was so important his bosses couldn't close deals without him. But pride has a way of mutating into loneliness. I remember one anniversary, our 5th, when he called from some airport lounge saying, "I'll make it up to you when I get back. Just order in something nice, treat yourself." His voice was warm, apologetic even, but the line crackled with background noise. Glasses clinking, voices laughing. He sounded more alive in that lounge than he ever did with me. When he came home, he brought flowers. Roses, always roses. But the petals couldn't cover the fact that I had spent that night alone, eating takeout and staring at our wedding picture on the mantel. The lies started small too. I was with clients. The flight got delayed. You wouldn't know him, he's just a colleague. And every time I asked a question, every time I pressed even a little, his tone sharpened. "Why don't you trust me, Rachel?" he would say, his brow furrowing with indignation. "Do you want me to quit my job? Throw away everything I've worked for just to sit at home and prove something to you?" I'd always back down, guilt settling heavy in my chest. 'Cause I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to believe the man I had married still existed somewhere under the polished surface. But support turned into silence. Silence turned into denial. And denial became habit. Still, there were moments that cut through. Moments that told me something was wrong. Like the time he came home with a faint smear of lipstick on his collar. He brushed it off as a clumsy coworker's hug. Or the time he missed my birthday dinner with friends, sending a last-minute text that simply read, "Flight delays. Sorry. Love you." No explanation. No call. Just words on a screen. Or the moment I found an unfamiliar earring in the pocket of his suitcase. A tiny stud with a blue stone. He swore it must have fallen in by accident at airport security. "People drop things all the time," he said, kissing my forehead as if reassurance could erase suspicion. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I wanted to believe him. But deep down I think I knew. One night, months before I followed him, we had a fight that still rings in my ears. I had asked him, gently, carefully, if we were okay. If he still wanted the same things we had once dreamed of. He looked at me for a long moment, then said coldly, "Rachel, you're too much sometimes. Too many questions, too much worry. Can't you just let me live my life without constantly needing reassurance?" Too much. The word stung worse than any insult. Because I had built my world around him. My life revolved around his schedule, his career, his dreams. And yet somehow I was the one who was too much. That night I cried myself to sleep on the couch, listening to the faint hum of his computer upstairs as he worked late, Or at least that's what he said he was doing. And even then I stayed. Because walking away felt like failure. And I wasn't ready to admit that the man I loved might be nothing more than a mask. Now, as I sat in my car outside that brick house in the rain, watching my husband disappear into another life, all those cracks lined up like dominoes. Every missed dinner, every cold dismissal, every rose meant to paper over guilt, they all made sense. The picture wasn't fractured anymore. It was whole. And it was ugly. I should have gone home that night. Should have turned the wheel, driven away, and let the betrayal settle like a stone in my chest. But something deeper took root in me as I stared at that upstairs window with its flicker of toys and bedtime lamps. I wasn't just betrayed. I was enraged. And rage doesn't retreat. The rain had stopped by the time I pulled away from the curb. My reflection in the rearview mirror startled me. Eyes red, jaw clenched, lips pressed tight. For the first time in years, I didn't see a woman waiting for her husband. I saw someone standing at the edge of war. By the time I reached home, the plan wasn't clear yet. But one truth was, Ethan had taken from me my trust, my marriage, my sense of security. I wasn't going to let him keep my dignity too. The suitcase sat where he had left it earlier by the door. Only now I knew the truth. He hadn't been leaving me behind. He had been living two lives, and I was just the background in one of them. As I leaned against the wall, staring at that empty hallway, my phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. Landed safely. Meetings all weekend. Don't wait up. My hand shook as I read it. The gall. The sheer audacity of lying so cleanly, so casually, while I had watched him kiss another woman just hours before. I wanted to scream, to smash the phone against the wall. But instead I sat down slowly, clutching it in my hands. Because I knew this was just the beginning. If Ethan thought he could live two lives without consequence, he had underestimated the one person who knew him best. And I was about to prove it. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The next morning, I woke up with the kind of heavy chest you get after a night of bad dreams. Except this wasn't a dream. It was real. Ethan wasn't at a hotel bar with colleagues. He was in that brick house with her. With him. For hours, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the untouched coffee pot. The hum of the fridge was the only sound in the room. Every few minutes, I'd glance at my phone, waiting for him to send another lie dressed as a text. But nothing came. By noon I couldn't take it anymore. The silence, the waiting, the wondering, it felt like I was suffocating. I grabbed my keys, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and adrenaline, and drove back to that quiet suburban street. The neighborhood looked so ordinary it made me sick. Kids on bicycles, neighbors trimming hedges, dogs barking behind picket fences. Nothing about it screamed scandal or betrayal. Nothing but the fact that my husband's car was parked in the driveway of another woman's home. I pulled up 2 houses away and cut the engine. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. My eyes locked on the red SUV I knew as well as my own. It sat there bold as brass, gleaming in the afternoon sun, a monument to the double life he'd been leading. The front door opened then, and my world split in two. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, glossy brown hair, her figure neat and put together in a way that felt deliberate, like she dressed for someone she wanted to impress. She carried a diaper bag slung over her shoulder. And then a small boy toddled after her, maybe 3 years old, holding her hand. My breath caught in my throat. The child's hair. That deep chestnut color. The shape of his nose. It was Ethan's. I blinked hard, my chest tightening as though my ribcage couldn't contain the truth. The boy's eyes, hazel the same as Ethan's, met mine across the street for a second, before the woman ushered him into the SUV with practiced ease. I wanted to get out of the car, scream across the street, demand answers. But my body wouldn't move. I was frozen in my seat, watching as my husband walked out moments later. his hand resting casually on the small of her back, his smile warm and familiar. That was my smile, the one he used to save for me. He buckled the child into the car seat, pressed a kiss to the woman's temple, and whispered something that made her laugh softly. Then they drove off together. The sound of the engine fading down the street felt like the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. I stayed there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, until my palms ached. The world outside blurred, tears streaking my vision, but inside me something sharp had solidified. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't a fling. He had a family. A whole family I knew nothing about. That night when he came home, his performance was flawless. He dropped his suitcase by the door, loosened his tie, and kissed me on the cheek like he hadn't spent the weekend tucking another child into bed. Long trip, he sighed, grabbing a beer from the fridge. Clients were a nightmare. I stared at him, numb, my ears ringing with the memory of his voice as he spoke to that other woman. The warmth in his tone, the tenderness in his gestures, none of it was for me anymore. And yet, he sat across from me at the dinner table, chewing steak like nothing had changed. I wanted to scream, to slam the knife against the table and demand answers. But all I could do was sit there, nodding at the right times, my heart pounding with the weight of what I now carried. Over the next few weeks, I gathered pieces of his secret like shards of glass. Every time he said conference, I checked his calendar. Every time he texted late meeting, I tracked his location. And every time it led back to her house. I learned her name, Lena. She worked part-time at a local boutique. Her son's name was Caleb. Caleb, my husband's son. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ethan's even breathing beside me, and wonder how many times he had whispered lies in his sleep. I'd replay every moment of our marriage, searching for clues, wondering how I could have been so blind. One evening I finally cracked. "Ethan," I said softly, my voice trembling. "Do you love me?" He looked up from his laptop, his expression blank. "Of course I do. Why would you even ask that?" "Because you're never here. Because you lie about where you are. Because—" "Rachel," he cut in sharply, his tone firm, "I'm doing this for us. For our future. Can't you see that? Our future." The words twisted in my gut. Whose future was he talking about? Mine or hers? That was the night I realized he would never tell me the truth. I could wait a lifetime and he would never willingly confess. He was too good at the performance, too invested in both lives to give one up. And so, the weight of the truth crushed me alone. Until I decided I couldn't carry it quietly anymore. The lowest point came when I attended a friend's baby shower. Balloons, laughter, pastel decorations everywhere. And in the corner, a little boy playing with blocks. His laugh echoed so sharply in my chest that I excused myself to the bathroom, clutching the sink as sobs racked my body. Because all I could see was Caleb. All I could hear was Ethan's voice calling him, buddy. All I could feel was the betrayal of realizing my husband had given another woman the one thing he had always told me he wasn't ready for. A family. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch until dawn, my body numb, my mind racing. The man upstairs wasn't just my husband anymore. He was a stranger. Liar. A father to someone else's child while pretending to build a life with me. And as the first light of morning crept through the curtains, one thought rang louder than the ache in my chest. If he thought he could bury me in lies, then he had underestimated the wrong woman. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his downfall. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The morning after the baby shower breakdown, I didn't cry. My body felt wrung out, like every tear had been burned away. Instead, something new settled inside me, quiet, steady, dangerous. For weeks, Ethan had been spinning his lies while I played the loyal wife. But no more. If he wanted to juggle two lives, I would make sure he dropped both. And that when he did, the crash would echo louder than anything he imagined. I started small. The next time he left for a business trip, I followed again, but this time I didn't just watch. I recorded. My phone trembled in my hands as I zoomed in on him carrying groceries with Lena, his hand brushing hers like they were an old married couple. I filmed him chasing Caleb across the yard, laughter bubbling out of him like the man I hadn't seen in years. I captured it all, proof he could never talk his way out of. Then I began digging. I combed through bank statements, piecing together purchases I had once brushed off as odd. Baby clothes. A second Netflix subscription. A monthly Venmo transfer labeled only utilities. He thought he was clever, hiding in plain sight. He wasn't. One night while he slept, I tiptoed into his home office and searched through drawers. Receipts stuffed into envelopes. Restaurant bills. A lease agreement. My stomach twisted as I held the paper up to the light. Ethan's name, scrawled in black ink, tied to Lena's address. He had signed himself into that house. Into that life. I pressed the paper flat against my chest, my heart thundering. The betrayal felt like a knife, but at the same time I could feel the shape of my revenge forming. Still, I knew I couldn't go charging in blindly. Ethan was slick, practiced. If I confronted him without a plan, he'd twist it back on me, just like always. No, I needed more than righteous anger. I needed precision. So I built a plan piece by piece like a puzzle. First, evidence. I wasn't going to be the woman with suspicions or paranoia. I was going to be the woman with hard, undeniable facts. I spent days collecting everything I could. Screenshots of his texts, printouts of his calendar entries, photographs of him leaving her house, holding her hand, kissing her cheek. By the time I was done, I had a folder thick enough to choke him with. Second, allies. If Ethan wanted to play the family man in public, then I would make sure the right eyes saw what kind of man he really was. I reached out to a colleague of his I knew well, under the pretense of catching up. Over coffee, I casually asked about Ethan's trips. The confusion on his face told me everything. No one at the firm had any idea. Perfect. Third timing. Revenge needed the right stage. Too early, and he'd wriggle out. Too late, and I'd drown in the waiting. I thought about every possible moment. Family holidays, his birthday, firm dinners. And then it clicked. The upcoming company gala. Ethan had been talking about it for weeks, boasting about how the partners would be watching him, how it was his chance to cement his rise. If he wanted to put on a show, I would make sure the curtain fell in front of everyone. But even with my plan forming, doubts gnawed at me. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, hearing his even breathing beside me, wondering if I had the strength to pull it off. He had convinced me for years that I was nothing without him, that I couldn't stand on my own. What if he was right? The thought haunted me. But then I'd close my eyes and see Caleb's hazel eyes staring back at me. I'd hear Lena's laugh as Ethan kissed her temple. And the fear would burn away, replaced by something sharper. He had stolen my trust, my love, my marriage. I wasn't about to let him keep my dignity too. So I started practicing. I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror, holding the folder of evidence, and rehearse what I would say. Ladies and gentlemen, you've all been celebrating Ethan tonight, but let me show you who he really is. My voice would tremble at first, but each time I repeated it, the tremor lessened. During the day I became an actress, smiling at him when he came home, asking about his meetings, cooking his favorite meals. I was the picture of the supportive wife while inside I was sharpening my blade. The hardest part was pretending when he touched me. When he leaned down to kiss my cheek, I had to fight not to recoil. When he sat close, scrolling through his phone, I had to bite my tongue to keep from snatching it out of his hands. Every touch felt like fire against my skin, not from passion but from betrayal. And still I smiled. Because soon his touches would mean nothing. His lies would mean nothing. One night I almost slipped. He came home late, reeking of perfume that wasn't mine, his tie askew. I stood in the doorway, blocking his path, the folder hidden under the couch just feet away. "Ethan," I said quietly, "do you ever think about what it would be like if everything you've built came crashing down?" He froze, his eyes flicking to mine with something I couldn't read. Then he forced a laugh. "You've been watching too many crime dramas, Rach. Everything's fine." And he walked past me like I was invisible. But as he disappeared upstairs, I pressed my hand against my chest and whispered to myself, "Not for long." The week of the gala, I made my final preparations. I printed extra copies of the evidence. I placed one set in my purse, another in the glove compartment of my car, and another in a safety deposit box at the bank. He wouldn't be able to bury the truth, not when I had scattered it like seeds. The night before the event, as Ethan bragged over dinner about the speech he planned to give, I smiled sweetly, my hand steady as I poured his wine. Inside, though, my heart was pounding like a drum. Because tomorrow wasn't just the gala. Tomorrow was the day I ended his double life. The night of the gala, the city glittered with lights that seemed to mock me. Ethan hummed in the car beside me, tapping the steering wheel with excitement. He wore his best suit, the one tailored last spring when he thought he was moving into the upper circle of the firm. His cufflinks gleamed, his tie knotted perfectly. He looked every bit the golden boy. And I was the dutiful wife at his side, smiling, nodding, listening as he rehearsed parts of his speech under his breath. "You'll see tonight, Rachel," he said, adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror. "This is the night everything changes for us." He had no idea how right he was. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered overhead. Waiters glided between tables with trays of champagne, and laughter rippled through the crowd. The partners were gathered near the stage, chatting with their spouses. I could feel the electricity in the air, the kind Ethan thrived on. We mingled, and I played my role flawlessly. I laughed at jokes, shook hands, complimented outfits. To anyone watching, we were the perfect couple, ready to step into the spotlight. When it was finally Ethan's turn at the microphone, he beamed like a man about to receive his crown. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice rich and confident, "thank you for being here tonight. It's been an incredible year, and I'm honored to stand among such talent. But the truth is, none of this would be possible without support, at work and at home." He gestured toward me. Eyes turned. Smiles spread. I returned the smile, steady as steel. And then I stood. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying across the room, "there's something everyone here should know." The room hushed. Ethan froze, confusion flickering across his face. "Rachel, what are you?" I stepped onto the stage beside him, my heels clicking against the polished wood. I pulled the folder from my purse, my hand steady. "For years, Ethan has lied. All of you. Me." While he claimed to be working late or traveling for business, he was building a second life. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan's smile faltered, his face draining of color. "Rachel, sit down," he hissed under his breath. "Not here. Not now." But I ignored him. I opened the folder and held up a photo of him holding Caleb in Lena's yard. His arms wrapped around the child with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in years. "This is the man you've been applauding tonight. A man with a secret family he thought he could keep hidden." Cameras clicked. Phones rose into the air. People leaned forward, eyes wide. I flipped through the evidence, each page hitting like a hammer. Bank statements, fixed. The lease with his signature. Each document louder than the last. Ethan reached for my arm, his voice breaking. "Stop." Rachel, please. But the crowd wasn't looking at him with admiration anymore. They were looking at him like he was filth. One of the partners stepped forward, his expression dark. Is this true, Ethan? Ethan stammered, his hands flailing. It's complicated. Rachel doesn't understand. Don't insult me further, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut. I understand perfectly. While I cooked your meals and washed your shirts, you played house somewhere else. While I stood by your side, you were giving vows to another woman in whispers. And while I wasted years believing I was your partner, you treated me like nothing. The silence in the room was suffocating. Every eye was on him. And then came the final blow. I pulled out the last page, the one I'd kept hidden until now. Divorce papers. Already signed by me, filed with an attorney, sealed with everything he feared most. The loss of his assets, his reputation, his perfect mask. You told me I was nothing without you, I said, my voice low but firm. But after tonight, you'll have nothing without me. I placed the papers on the podium, right in front of him, and stepped back. The room erupted. Whispers, gasps, murmurs. Ethan stood frozen, his hands trembling, his face pale. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, shrinking under the weight of his lies, crashing down in front of his colleagues, his bosses, his friends. I turned and walked off the stage, my heels clicking like gunshots. No one stopped me. No one tried to comfort him. The golden boy had been unmasked, and everyone saw him for what he really was. Outside, the night air was cold against my skin, but it felt like freedom. Over the next weeks, the fallout spread like wildfire. Ethan was called into meetings, his business trips scrutinized. His credibility shattered. The promotion vanished. The firm distanced itself, embarrassed by his scandal. And Lena, once the truth spread, her quiet suburban life crumbled too. She hadn't known he was still married, hadn't realized the depth of his lies. As for me, I rebuilt, piece by piece, day by day. I moved into my own place, small but filled with light. I found work that valued me, not the image I was supposed to maintain. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, people who reminded me I was more than a wife betrayed. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. Ethan tried calling, begging, demanding. He wanted to explain, to twist, to salvage something. I blocked every number. I didn't need his voice anymore. I had already written the ending. He had lied. He had cheated. He had hidden me in the shadows while he lived in the sun. But when I dragged his secrets into the light, he burned. And I walked away free. 'Cause he was wrong all along. I was never nothing. And now, he was the one left with nothing at all. Ethan told me I was nothing without him. Yet when the truth came out, he was the one standing with nothing. No promotion, no respect, no future. Me. I walked into freedom, stronger and untouchable. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Lies rot in the dark, but once they're dragged into the light, they burn the liar alive.